There's so much talk about healing, but in my view, when we say healing, we assume that something is inheritedly wrong with us. I don't quite agree with that. I believe we already have all the resources we need. We are perfect just as we are. What we can do is transform what feels dark or heavy. So I'm not necessarily a promoter of healing. I'm a promoter of transformation and evolution. Even this painful, shadowy topic of transgenerational trauma, today's subject, can be full of light if we choose to look at it in this way. My approach is always systemic. What does that mean? I never treat just the individual. I always consider the person in relation to many other factors, their family system, organizational system, and many other networks they are part of. The connection between elements of a system is often more relevant than any one element itself. The first systemic law is the law of belonging. From this perspective of giving every element in the system its rightful place, we begin to see that transgenerational trauma is really the system's or greater consciousness's attempt to reintegrate excluded elements. So, what has been excluded in the past, like the victims of war, for example, if they weren't remembered or honored, tends to reappear in future generations. The same applies to things like abortions that were never spoken about. Many of us were raised in a way that encouraged silence around such topics. It was a source of shame. How could you tell your child what you've done? If the person involved in that act blamed themselves, then all of that pain, all of that darkness tied to the family secrets get passed on transgenerationally. Yes, these things live in us, and studies shown this every clear, up to 7 generations. A study comes to mind on mice. In the first generation, the mice were electroshocked. The next generation, even though they had no exposure to the initial trauma, exhibited the same extreme fear reactions. These baby mice were from the same lineage but raised in completely different laboratories, and still they had the same responses as their traumatized parents. The same is true for humans. That's now undeniable. The trauma is transmitted biologically and chemically. What our family members carry is passed down, and this has deep truth in it. If we take a step back and look at someone like Steve Jobs, for example, a genius in the eyes of most, a marketing guru, highly accomplished. But if we look at his personal life, beyond financial success, we see someone who was abandoned at birth and raised by others. His relationships were rocky. He denied his first child and had complex dynamics with his later family. In the movie, there's a scene where he eats at a restaurant without knowing the server is his actually biological father, an Indian man. Could it be that part of Steve Jobs' drive to prove himself came from a deep, unresolved child wound or a transgenerational trauma? I believe all trauma is transgenerational. We are passed down as a legacy. As I like to say, we are exactly what our ancestors once dreamed. We carry their hopes and light projected into their idea of a future, which is us. We represent everything that came before us, and it lives in our bodies. There's also loyalty, a key concept in systemic work, especially when someone rejects a parent, actively judges them, or feels superior to them. In Steve Jobs' case, if he rejected his parents and thought he was better than them, we see the Luciferian complex. I am better than my father. But this often leads us back into the exact same emotional experience of the one we rejected. Why? Because systems self-regulate. If we exclude a parent, a behavior, a trauma, like war trauma, or our grandmother's abortions, the system brings it back around. We or our descendants may experience the same pain or situations. This might sound logical, almost mathematical. There are universal laws that govern systems. If we know them and honor them, then life flows through us and love transforms. So, the law of belonging. The moment you exclude something, it will return in another form. You can't escape from yourself, your lineage, your family, or your life. Have you noticed how many times this happens? Let's say you dislike a certain trait in your boss. You leave the company, move to another one, and end up with the same type of boss, as if you created it. Because that's exactly what happens. Everything you are ever excluded will return. That's the law of belonging. Do I believe we come more with transgenerational trauma than personal trauma? In my view, personal trauma simply brings to the surface what's already being transmitted transgenerationally. We are the result of everything that came before. You can't really separate one from the other. It's no coincidence that you experience certain situations. You'll see that nearly 100% of them are also found in the lives of your mother, father, grandparents, and so on. This idea of the 7 generations or up to the 7th ancestral line is real. The more love and light we bring to our lineage, the better. Look at the Christian tradition where many of us were born. Whether we practice or not, we are familiar with remembrance rituals, naming ancestors in prayer, lighting candles, writing names in remembrance books, or doing spiritual practices in their honor. This brings immense support because systematically it's a conscious inclusion of what was once excluded. It brings peace to the soul of the person doing it and light to the entire lineage. I see this constantly in my coaching and mentorship programs. When one person brings light into their life, it also uplifts their parents, children, and many people around them. When you heal in this life, you also heal past generations, and future generations benefit too. You are cleaning the entire system, both backwards and forward. But there's an important caveat. We must not violate the second systemic law, which is the law of order. If you are doing this healing work to save your parents, it's not correct. You do the work for yourself without believing you are superior to those who came before you. You do it for yourself and possibly for your descendants. To your ancestors, you offer gratitude and honor without trying to save them. You'd be surprised how many people ask me, how can I help my mother? The answer is, you respect her destiny. With a heavy fate comes great power and spiritual gifts. Let's look at some extraordinary people, including the saints who survived the prisons. Their lives were incredibly difficult, but they brought immense light. Light comes from darkness, or rather, you need darkness to truly see light. The two are connected. We can't have one without the other in this earthly experience. So, trauma is simply an event that triggered internal mechanisms that the person couldn't manage at the time. They developed coping strategies. That's not negative at all. As I pointed out earlier, darkness and light serve the same purpose. These hardships, of course, come with a cost, but they also come with great gifts. For example, the gift of humbleness in front of life and our ancestors. This brings tremendous blessings. My role is to shine light on areas the mind tends to label as negative. But I always return to the idea that everything is positive. Really, we just haven't seen it from a higher perspective yet. The higher you rise, the more clarity you'll see that from a systemic perspective, everything is love. Children who unknowingly repeat the suffering of their grandparents, thinking, if grandpa suffered, I must suffer too to honor him. But once we bring light to the story, such as through constellations, which I facilitate, we see that we can express the same love and loyalty without repeating the suffering. That's true liberation. And yes, loyalty can extend up to 7 generations. I've seen in my study go as far as 15 generations. These are complex topics, but the key is, what do we do with them? We follow the 3 systemic laws. Belonging. Everything and everyone has a place. Order. What came before is greater. We must approach with humbleness and reverence. And third, the law of balance or exchange. Every relationship must have fair give and take. The exception is the parent-child relationship. Parents give, children receive. If we honor these 3 laws in our lives, things will begin to flow with more ease and love. It is possible for someone to come into this life with illness that are also transgenerational, you might ask yourself. Yes, absolutely. The illness might appear in this reality as part of a soul's preparation path. I've worked with this topic in constellations, and I find it fascinating every time. That symptom, that illness, always comes from love within the system. I know that might sound difficult to hear, but if you don't respect the laws of the system, something will always repeat. It's all love and loyalty, but not the kind of love with butterflies. It's loyal love. Let me share a case. It might make things easier to grasp. A girl gets sick. Her parents came to the constellation session. What emerges in the constellation is that the daughter's cancer appeared so the mother wouldn't follow a previously aborted child into death. The mother had an abortion, and her soul wanted to join the aborted child in death. This happens often if the true grief hasn't been processed. Unconsciously, the mother was slowly preparing to leave this life. So, what does the child do? She gets sick to keep her mother grounded in this world. She says, through her body, "Stay with me, don't leave." It's nothing but love, pure love, but unconscious love. In the constellation, we place the mother face to face with the aborted child. She acknowledges them. You are mine, you are my responsibility, and more. That internal shift in the mother changes the family dynamic. Then the girl can be released from the illness. She gains permission to stop carrying the burden. Even in the ReGeneration Academy study, we had a young woman with a rare condition involving lymphatic fluid accumulation in her abdomen. She couldn't release it. We did a constellation. You won't believe it. She was asked whether she had any siblings. She said no. But it turned out her mother had lost a child during pregnancy exactly 1 year before she was born, a 4-month fetus. So much trauma, so much unspoken grief. And the daughter mirrored it with her lymph, retaining fluid, just like her mother had retained the unborn child. The client, a fellow student, a colleague of mine, realized, "Mom, you're not alone. I'm like you. I love you." But this is not healthy loyalty. Again, the illness is nothing but hidden love. She worked on honoring her mother without trying to save her, because as children, we love our parents so deeply, even if we think we don't. At the soul level, there is no greater love than that between a child and their parent. A child will go as far as sacrificing their own life to make the parent feel better. Just like we, as parents, would give our lives for our children. So, depending on what each soul carries, some children manifest illness as an act of love. So, what kind of therapy or practices do I recommend to transform transgenerational trauma? What comes to mind first is the book of one of my main mentors in constellations, Mark Wally. He's a revolutionary in the field. His book is It Didn't Start With You. He's working on a second book. I hope it becomes widely available. In that book, you'll find many exercises. One of the most powerful one is the family tree. Start with that. Draw yourself in a square if you are a male, or a circle if you are a female. Then your siblings, then your parents, and so on. Try to gather as much information as you can about your family history. This brings clarity and light into your inner world. Second, write letters. If you still have unresolved emotions, resentment, or unspoken things with family members, write to them. This helps tremendously. And third, light candles for all who have passed, especially those who were forgotten, both victims and perpetrators. We tend to ignore or judge some ancestors, but when we do that, those patterns will simply repeat themselves in our lives and in our descendants' life. In my community, I have a free course and exercises you can start with. After that, I invite people to join me for constellation sessions, if they feel called. Because in the end, this is not just your burden, it's much bigger than you.